Welcome to the Life Hacks Show. Life Hacks gives you proof hacks and tips for the best version of yourself. And here's your crash test dummy for a better life, Marcus Moirer.
Yo, welcome to another episode of the DNX podcast and the Life Hacks Show. And today I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to this day since weeks, because finally I have Natalie Sisson on the podcast. And Natalie Sisson is a huge inspiration for thousands of people all around the world, especially also for me and for Feli. Natalie is originally from New Zealand, has a dual citizenship in New Zealand and the United Kingdom, has traveled to over 70 countries to date and lived on 5 continents. Natalie is a best-selling author, inspiring keynote speaker, and established a multiple 6-figure business. She self-describes her as a freedomist. She believes that your business should allow you to live your ideal lifestyle, not take over it. Welcome to the show, my dear friend, Natalie.
I'm so excited to be here finally.
Yeah, it's so great to hear you once again and to see you once again via Skype. I'm a little bit sad that you can't join us for DNX Lisbon this year, because you have been on our stage already twice and you always rock the stage and rock the event.
I know, I'm actually pretty gutted. I'd love to be there with you in Lisbon right now. I keep having people go, can't wait to see you there. And I'm like, oh, if I could wiggle my nose. And if I wasn't on the other side of the world right now with circumstances that have just made it a little bit hard, I would totally be there. And I'll be there in spirit.
Yeah, we will talk about your new circumstances in a minute. But first, let us start with when did you start into the digital nomad lifestyle? Because you're one of like the legends in our world, in our microcosm.
I feel like I've just been overtaken by all these young ones who are just all throwing themselves into the lifestyle. I started in 2010. I'm like one of the originals, back before there was no Uber and there wasn't an Airbnb, but it started pretty quickly after that. And there weren't any of these wonderful things like DNX and co-workation and all these amazing things that now exist for people to be a digital nomad and do it with ease. So it just feels like, I was right at the beginning of all that.
It's hard to remember, but also there were no co-working or tropical co-working spaces at all, right?
No, nothing actually. I mean, there were co-working spaces. I probably discovered a few about 3 years in around the world. Actually one in Berlin, which I really loved, and a few in the US, but not as many as there are now. And none of these kind of like nomad cruises and crazy things with people traveling together for a whole year. And places like Rome and stuff. There's just so much that's out there now for people.
Yeah, it's really hard to believe for people who are starting out now, which circumstances and what the word like when we started out, even for us, for Philly and me, 5 years ago, there were no Airbnbs all over the world. There were no Ubers. There were no co-working spaces. It was really hard to hustle in these hostels, and people felt sorry for you sitting at the laptop all the time. How was it for you when you started out?
You just gave me a flashback. I mean, I was trying not to do too many of the hostels, but you're right. You'd sit in a cafe, you'd get kind of like nudged on from a cafe if you sat there for too long. You'd be in hostels or hotels trying to lock into the terrible Wi-Fi that they had. It just wasn't the same. Usually just hanging out in your hotel room, sweating because there was no air conditioning. And I just remember so many moments of going, I just want decent internet, and I just want a place where I can be with other people who get what I'm doing and don't look at me strangely.
Mm-hmm. I know for many people back then in these days, there was also not really a community of like-minded digital nomads who could exchange and ping ideas and exchange the best workarounds and hacks, how to get like the best visa conditions or the best internet Wi-Fi. And I know many people struggled with loneliness on the road. How did you tackle this topic?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm so glad that you guys have come along to create that community and other people too. It's a really good question. I'm trying to think back to how I tackled it. I think that's why I built my community, really, because even though they weren't necessarily doing what I was doing yet, I felt like in being able to share my story and give them tips and tactics, it was almost like I was helping them to do what I was doing so they could come and join me. And then I think just reaching out to other people when you were on the road and meeting them, you'd be like, oh, you kind of do what I do, or we're both trying to build businesses from anywhere. Latch on to those people. And I think I made the most of masterminds while I was there. So I started just connecting with people and actually making masterminds. You having a drink of water there?
Yeah. Good to hear.
So, yeah, I could, but you're right. I think it was just a matter of, it felt isolated sometimes, but that's why I connected with and built a community online so that I could, as I said, share those experiences and start to connect into other people. And then people come out of the woodwork and it became a little bit more common in the scheme of things. It's still not really that common, but it is within the community of people who live and breathe it.
And back then in these times, who were the people who were inspiring you, or who introduced you to the concept of the masterminding already in 2010?
You know what? I actually think it was from reading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, because he actually does kind of talk about the power of a mastermind, or the meeting of minds, and all the people that he got to interview for that book. And then I was working with Natalie McNeil at that point. Her and I had sort of gone into business together doing Women Entrepreneurs Mastermind, and we called it We Mastermind, and we started that in 2011. So we're pretty early on with it. And then we would actually run masterminds with our awesome women entrepreneurs. And then at the same time as that, I had met some people that I was doing that online with, just people that I'd met at conferences early on in my business career, and just said, look, would you mind meeting up and talking? So I kind of think it just evolved from, like, we put it together, and then I read more about how to run a mastermind, and just went from there, really.
Yeah, now it all sounds very easy and very straightforward, but I'm sure you also had some struggles and some challenges to take. How was it when you broke out of the corporate world? So maybe take us to the time when you were, I don't know, I think you were working as a lawyer, right?
No, I'd love to be saying I was a lawyer. I was basically doing business development and turning doctors into entrepreneurs. So I came up ranks through marketing, and then from marketing into brand management. I worked for Schwarzkopf Professional there for a while, for a German company. And then when I moved to London, I went into more marketing contracts, and then into business development and propositions development, would you believe, is what it people back home used to think I was propositioning people. I was like, no, I'm legitimately building business propositions. But so it was a really good grounding, I think, to get into my own business, but certainly not anything like I was about to dive into. You know, you're in an office each day, you're commuting, you're working the normal hours, you're working for a salary for somebody else. Just don't even make me think back to those days.
And where did this calling come from, that you gonna change something? Was it an outside calling, inner calling? Was it a combination? How did you get to the decision to break free?
It was a definite inner calling, because I remember waking up and just not wanting to go into work, and I can't remember ever having had that experience before. Like, generally I enjoyed the work that I did, even if not always the environment, but I woke up like several days in a row just actually wanting to take sick days or take days off. And I was like, what is that? Like, that is so not me. I'm usually very motivated and very enthusiastic about what I want to do.
I know.
It was, and it was just soul sucking. And so I just I really listened to my gut and to my heart. And I was like, you can't endure a week more of this, let alone 2 weeks. Most people will stick around in something like that for a year or more. Or even longer. They're just kind of like, no, I need the stability and I need the money. And I was like, well, I probably need those things, but I'll be damned if I'm going to stick around here and let them beat me down into submission when I could be doing my own thing. So I think it was just this absolute desire not to be stuck in something that was making me unhappy, and taking action on that almost immediately. So I was out of there within a month. Quit my job after not even a year. I just had a promotion. I was earning really good money, Marcus, and it was a really good position on paper. But the reality of it was office politics and being stifled with innovation and not being able to do what they brought me in to do. So that's why I decided to just head off to Canada and play ultimate frisbee and start my own thing.
Yeah, you're doing so many things. So back then in these times, you were based in UK, right?
I was, yeah. So I was living in London,
Okay,
traveling a
so
lot
also
throughout Europe.
the cost of living were probably very high. So even you have
So
a big
high.
salary, it's all most of the money
Yeah,
is taken away from the rent and all this stuff.
exactly. You always feel poor, I think, unless you're earning like mega millions, but you always feel poor in London,
Yeah,
even though I
and
love it as a city.
and when you started out, did you already have a plan? Did you already have the knowledge to be self-employed and to make your own living, or did you already build something on the side while being employed, or how did you? What were the first action steps?
I
Did you take?
definitely didn't have a plan, Marcus, but I did, looking back, have knowledge that I didn't even realize was going to come in handy. So, no, my only plan was get yourself to Vancouver, Canada, play the World Championship Ultimate Frisbee, and then figure out how to start your own business. And the only idea that I'd come up with, to be honest, was I wonder if I could be a consultant and go into corporations and
Mhm.
teach them about health and wellness so that their employees are more happy, not miserable, and they'll
Makes
have better
sense.
retention rates,
Mhm.
fewer sick days. I was really just kind of calling on my own experience, but I didn't
Mhm.
have any experience in that apart from I have a certificate in fitness management and like no background apart from helping people or advising them. So I was just lucky that I went to a lot of networking events in the tech scene and ended up meeting a co-founder who, well, we became co-founders together because I said, here's my background skills. And he was
Mhm.
like, that's pretty much what I need. In fact, I said, I'm a homeless, unemployed bum with great skills in marketing and business development. And he said, we should talk. It literally was the conversation we had. So I was pretty lucky that my terrible attempt at marketing myself actually came off with starting a business and a Facebook application business as well.
Wow. And back then on the conferences, were there already also lots of women's who were entrepreneur or women, or did it only change in the last years? And I think there's still some gaps to close.
We definitely were the minor party at every conference that I went to, and I'm talking about women in general. So it was pretty much, especially when we went to things like the PayPal conference, it was just
Mm.
like 97% men. And I remember one time we actually decided to hire a booth at one of the conferences, even though we were a startup and we had really very little money. We decided to spend it on a booth so that we could get front prime action, and people were coming over to see a demo of our app fundraiser. And I was there and I was like, had my jacket on, a skirt or whatever. And somebody, I think the most people who came up to me thought I was like a booth babe because every other woman who was there was hired to just basically wear a t-shirt and
Mm.
be really friendly and walk around. And I was like, no, I'm the co-founder of this company and let me show you how to use our app. It was just, yeah, it was tough back then, which is partly where Women's World, which is now Suitcase Entrepreneur, came out of because I wanted to talk about people and I wanted to talk to other women
Mhm.
entrepreneurs, say, how are you successful? How can you succeed? Here's some examples that I've had. Here's what I'm doing. And that's when I started interviewing women entrepreneurs, particularly in tech, but just women entrepreneurs in general about how they were succeeding and what they did. And that's where it all started from.
Yeah, it's such a strong brand, Suitcase Entrepreneur. How did you came up with the idea of calling it Suitcase Entrepreneur?
Because about a year after traveling and living out of my suitcase, I went to another conference, and
Mhm.
everybody always asks you the same questions, don't they? Where are you from? What do you do? And I was
Mm.
like, well, I'm from New Zealand. No, yeah, where are you from and what do you do? So I'd be like, I'm from New Zealand, but right now I live out of my suitcase. And then what do I do? I was basically just trying to inspire entrepreneurs at that point. I was still a little lost myself. And
Mm.
everybody was like, you live out of a suitcase? And it was just this really interesting point of difference. And at this conference, somebody was like, oh, so you're like a traveling entrepreneur? And I was like, yeah, I am. And he's like, you're like a suitcase entrepreneur. I was like, oh, when you have those light bulb moments, I was like, that's
Yeah.
it. That's it. And he said, go and buy the domain. And I did, like after the conference that night in the hotel room. And it was really helpful because that solidified everything that I did. Not that you have to be
Mhm.
living out of a suitcase, but it meant mobility and packing
Mhm.
up and going light and being minimalist and running your business from anywhere was ultimately what it was all about.
Yeah. And you were just talking about playing the Ultimate Frisbee Championship, and I know that you have been also competing on stage, I think in bodybuilding or fitness class, shaping your body.
It was ages ago now. That's like, do you know that's 13 years ago now? Or almost. I can't believe it. I might have to do it again.
Really. I think when you Google for yourself and the Google picture search, you still find some pictures from you competing on the stage. It's funny. It's cool, and it's very inspiring because you're so ambitious on different kinds, levels of your life, and the whole holistic approach of life. You're always like a high achiever, a top performer. Was it always the case that when you start to do something, you're like trying to get the best in the world in doing something?
Is that what you think? I don't know if I do that. I'm just ambitious, I guess, and I just set high expectations for myself, and to be fair of everybody around me. I just think that we're all capable of doing so much more, and so I don't know. I just push myself and I test myself, and I go for it. But it doesn't feel like I'm really striving to be anybody special. I just love putting things into action and doing my best at them.
Just pushing the boundaries and getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and I think I've mellowed a lot in that. Like, I found a lot of inner peace in my new sort of setup, which we're going to talk about. But I don't know what's caused it, actually, because my family are pretty relaxed and chilled, and I don't know. I just love taking life by the horns and just running with it. And you might as well live life to the full. So yeah.
This is what, to be honest, what really inspires me and Philly about you, that you're really, really hardworking, hustling, but still in inner peace, in balance, always smiling and a good mood. And you're such a force of nature when it also comes to business. You're writing books, you're doing online courses, you started a huge community platform, you're doing your podcast, you're doing videos, interviews, you have lots of media coverage, then you got into property investing. How do you manage your time, and how do you manage all this stuff?
It doesn't feel like a lot of stuff to me. I think it probably looks like it to other people, but my sister said to me a few weeks ago, Nat, you're not really like other people. You can fit a lot more in one day. I love fitting a lot in one day, and it doesn't feel busy. It feels fulfilling. But I also do have good systems, and I have good time management, and I've just continually worked on ways to get the right stuff done and focus on the important things, and then make time for the fun stuff. So yeah, I think it's just been a process of really being more disciplined to have that freedom, which we've talked about before in person, and just really developing systems that work, and then hopefully sharing those as well with my community.
What are these systems for example?
They'd be giving it all away. No, well, for example, my whole team and I work on Slack, Asana, and Google Drive, which is not uncommon for a lot of other people to use, but I think it's how you use them, So in Asana, we're very, I guess, disciplined once again about how we create tasks, who we share them with, how we create subtasks, where we link to things like Google Docs, who we put on as followers and tag. And we just got good standard operating procedures. We have ways of doing each thing. And I always try to communicate with new team members about how we use all these tools so that we're more efficient. And I always try to mentor and coach people through them as well, because I think a lot of people get caught up in using way too many things rather than just keeping it simple. That's one of them. And another one that I'm sure you use too, but I'm a huge fan of Pomodoros and doing 25 minutes on and then, a couple of minutes break. And I'm currently loving the Toggle app, which is basically just a timekeeping app that tracks your time, but it's fascinating to see where your time goes. And I've set up the projects in my life, business and personal, and I track everything. Like, it's just easy to just hit the play button and then put in what I'm doing. And at the end of the week, I get a report on exactly where my time's gone. And after a while, you really start to be able to see where you're being effective and where you're procrastinating. And it just makes it easier to manage things and get a much better handle on where your time is going.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing. And I will put all the tools and links you were mentioning into the show notes of this podcast. One thing you were mentioning is the SOPs. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about a standardized operating procedure and how it helped you to set up your systems.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat that?
You were talking about SOPs, right? Or did I get you wrong?
Yes. Yeah, I call them sexy operating procedures, but but the name is standard operating procedures, which sounds normally a bit boring to me.
Yeah, it is. Because this was also a big game changer for us in our business, and so maybe you can just introduce it to the listeners how powerful this could be if you set it up properly and do the work and always keep it updated.
Well, what I think it is in the most simplified version is literally a step-by-step procedure on how to do this one important thing that you do almost daily or all the time. And the point of writing it down step by step is that anybody else can come along, like anybody should be able to come off the street, read your notes, like open this, do that, click here, insert that, and they should be able to do that task just as well as you, if not better. And I'm not talking about for every task like relationship building, etc. Sometimes that has to be you, but for tasks that you do all the time, like editing and formatting blog posts, like what you're doing with the podcast here. So after you've recorded this, in my world, after I've recorded an audio, I don't touch it again. It goes off to my podcast editor. It then goes to my assistant to actually format and edit and transcribe it. And I just check it off before it gets published. And that's because we've got a really good standard operating procedure where everybody knows their little part that they're playing to make that come off. And it sounds like a lot of work up front, but as you know, Marcus, once you've done it once, it's really easy. You get kind of a template going and you just can record your screen, which is what I often do to do it even more quickly. So I just talk for about 2 minutes, talk people through what I'm doing on the screen, and then I get my team to actually transcribe it and put it in their own words and create the document, which is like another step ahead of what other people do. And another cool tool while we're talking about it that I've just been introduced to and I love is called Loom. So not Zoom, the webinar meeting platform, but Loom, Loom, is basically just a recording screen share app, but it's right there in your Gmail or on your browser. So I could I could start an email to you now. I could hit Loom. I would record a video of my screen and what I'm doing, and then it would actually just insert it straight into the email and send it to you. So you don't have to go into Google Drive or Dropbox. It's really cool. So things like that just are being built all the time, and without going nuts on lots of tools, it's just picking and choosing the ones that save you the most time and working with what you're doing.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And I also want to add to the Pomodoro technique, which I also really adore and use on a daily basis, is when I do my Pomodoros, like 25 minutes in a row, then 5-minute break, 25 minutes, and then at a certain time, a longer break, like 10 minutes. I also listen to binaural sounds from the app brain.fm. And this is really, really cool. So if you have the chance, everybody who's listening, or you, Natalie, check it out. It really helped me to get also into another level of flow when working. It's called brain.fm.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what drives you? What is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing every day?
That's a great question. Well, my main mission is to help 1 million entrepreneurs create freedom in business and adventure in life by 2020, which is coming up sooner than I think. And how I sort of mention 1 million is my reach. Like, who am I reaching? Is it through my podcast, through my videos, through my book, and who's telling their friends about the work that I'm doing? So sometimes some of that's just, you can't even calculate it. But the point would be to be able to say that I can turn around in many years from now and say, you know what, I helped several hundred, if not several thousand, if not tens of thousands, hopefully to make a step in the direction of having more freedom in their life. So what drives me really is actually continually improving on understanding what freedom is, and also how to incorporate more of it into my day and my life, and also how to help other people have more of it themselves. That's it.
That's a big why. That's a big why. And talking about your systems and your teams, there's one question which is in my head. You were mentioning your team. How did it happen when did you start to build your team, and how many people are now in your team, and do they all work fully remote, and what are the special challenges of having a remote team?
Yeah, I started with my first team member in 2012, about 3 weeks before I went on an epic bicycle ride down Africa, realizing that I was going to be offline for about 2 months, cycling 6,500 Ks, and thinking maybe, just maybe, I needed somebody on my team to be there. So I hired my virtual assistant through what is now Upwork, and she was based in India at the time. Her name is Margaret, and she's been great. She stayed with me for about 2 years in my business, and then went off to actually do volunteer work for women entrepreneurs, which I thought was awesome. But she basically just kept the customer service up at the other end. Everything else I had scheduled out, like my blog posts, my products were all, basically available to buy online automatically. So that was brilliant. And I think it just was really just having somebody to just make sure the admin and the emails behind the scene were getting answered. But the rest of it, I'd pretty much geared up for, and I'd said, I'm going to be offline, follow my journey, but don't expect me to get in touch. My coaching clients, I'd said we're having a 2-month break, and they were all totally good with that. And I think so long as you communicate stuff in your business, people are always going to be able to respect your timelines and your boundaries, especially digital nomads who are often offline on a plane in a Wi-Fi free zone. So that was my first hire. And then I didn't take anybody else on actually for several months, if not 6 months or more. And then I hired like a website designer contractor. And then it kind of rolled in from there. So at no point have I ever had a full-time employee. I have about 5 to 6 part-timers on my team. They're all contractors. They all have their own business, or they all freelance. And they work between sort of 5 to 15, 20 hours a week for me. My virtual assistant, Angeline, now is great, and she probably works the most hours, but it's never really more than that. I have a podcast editor, a WordPress sort of guru. I have a designer who's actually based in Lisbon. Yeah, my designer is based in Lisbon, actually, Philippe. He came to me through an email. He just emailed me right at the start of my business, actually, and said, I really love your work. If you ever want me to design a logo, I'd love to do it for you for free. And then I ended up hiring him, and he's been with me ever since.
That's so cool. Yeah? This is the approach
you have to do. It is so cool. Yeah. And I just every so often bring on people for launches. So I've got a Facebook ads guy right now that I'm working with. I've had a sales funnel person in before. Even though I love sales funnels, it's always good to get external help and a perspective. And so I just bring people on when I need them. Got an SEO specialist right now doing some work behind the scenes.
Nice.
Yeah, and I actually look back on it. I've had a bunch of people over my time, and some of those roles worked out and some of them didn't. And a lot of it was testing and figuring it all out. And I'm actually about to run a Freedom Lab, which is like a 30-day incubator where I'm going to take people through making your first hire and building a dream team, because I still think it's so important for people to delegate and to get out of their business and stop working in it and start working on it. It just becomes so much more fun when you get to do that.
Totally. What we totally underestimated is the work and effort you have to put into every single contractor. Some are more on their own feet, but some really need attention and want to have lots of Skype calls and need some guidance. And it's lots of work until you are there where you want to be with your team.
Absolutely.
Same for you?
Yeah, I think it's great to do everything when you start out. It's really good to know all the different facets of your business, but you're a lunatic if you think you can survive that way. And there's a point at which you're going to get burnout because you simply don't enjoy it anymore and you can't handle it. Grow into your team and hire when you need, and you'll suddenly get addicted to it and you just want to hand everything over because it's so awesome when you've got capable people doing stuff for you. It's so good, it, right? It's like, have this and have this and take this and
let's do this, let's do that. And we are just creating new businesses and ideas and projects and just loading them in our team. But the thing is, at a certain point, everything comes back to you, and then you have to also do the work, and then say, "Oh my God, what did we push in the last weeks? What did we start again? How many new business? How many new projects?" But it's fun, huh? It's just to be able to start and do whatever you want. I'm still appreciating every day the entrepreneur freedom, just do and start whatever we want.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you're probably at that level like a lot of us get to, where you probably need to hire in almost like a CEO of some of your businesses now. So the next step for you guys would be finding that person who can manage those businesses. And so there's always evolutions in your hiring as well, which is the fun thing about it.
Totally. Yeah, the next step would be something like an operations manager in between us, because right now we still have a reporting line to everybody in our team, and these are with all the contractors. We have 25 people now on our team, and that's crazy. And we are just stuck in Slack and running through the different channels, and Active Collab is the project management tool we are using, and we are just rushing on all these cards, but we know where we need to change something. So we will tackle this after meeting Nix in Lisbon.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds great. But you know what you need to do, right? And that's half of it is knowing.
Yeah. How did it come that you got into property investing, and when did this happen?
Ooh, good question. Hey, you know what? Nobody's ever freaking asked me that, so thank you.
I love the episode, by the way. I listened to the podcast. I can still remember where I've been in the garden from Felicia's parents, and I've been listening to the podcast, how you started to invest in. Yeah, you would tell the story, but it was very inspiring.
Thank you. I got into it, which is really ironic for a suitcase entrepreneur. I mean, if I'm really fair, I bought my first house at about age 23, and I could barely afford it. And my parents helped out with a small deposit, and then I just had this massive mortgage. So I knew the power of property from way back. My parents have always done pretty well through it, just buying right, doing it up, on selling for more, doing the next one up, etc. But when I came back to New Zealand I'm trying to remember when I bought my house, 2011, and I was back in New Zealand for the first time in 6.5 years. And while I was here, I just felt this real desire to want to buy an investment property or a base. And I think deep down what I wanted was some roots back here, because I'd been away for a fair while. So I bought a beautiful house in the Wairarapa. For anybody who knows New Zealand, it's like the wine and country region. And that's also where we had a house when I was age 10 to 14. So I had really fond memories of the area. And I bought this pretty little 2-bedroom bungalow and then just tenanted it and sold it after 2 and a bit years for a decent price, because I wanted to buy more property. So I bought that property. I'm totally wrong on the year. When did I buy it? It was 2014, sorry.
Yeah.
And then I bought a studio when I came back the next year, so you can see a bit of a trend, and I could buy that outright. I got it for a really good price, and that has doubled in price in 2.5 years, which is nuts. And then I bought a house in Portugal last year, which you know.
Yeah, I love it.
And sorry, I'm mixing it up. So I bought house in Wairarapa, studio in Wellington, bought another apartment in Wellington when I came back when my dad got sick, because I thought, you know what, I'm going to be here. And so I want a proper base, and it's an awesome 2-bedroom apartment. I rent it out. I put it on an Airbnb. It's amazing. And then I sold my property in the Wairarapa to be able to buy the house in Portugal, and to also invest in this house that my partner Josh and I have now bought, which is this epic, huge house, which is ridiculous, on 2.5 acres of land. So it feels pretty funny that the suitcase entrepreneur owned all these properties, but they're just a really good, for me, a really good form of investment. They're a diverse form of revenue and income. I've been really lucky to have great tenants. I've been lucky and somewhat shrewd and smart, I guess, to buy at the right price and pick the right properties. And you will laugh, because at the time of this interview, about 4 hours before, I put an offer on a commercial building, which I have never done in my life, and scares the bejesus out of me. But I don't know if it'll come off, but I might buy a building to be able to create a co-working space close to where I live.
Wow.
You know that, did you? It's all happening in this part of the world.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing the news exclusively here on the DNX podcast.
Exactly.
Do you have
Yeah.
some tips and tactics for people who are also willing to invest in properties and don't know, for example, how much of the money they should have like in their own wallets and how much you can how much you can cover with a mortgage or something?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends on where you are in the world. But what I would suggest is, oh, there's so many factors. But if we're going to simplify it down, you do have to do your due diligence. So never get emotionally involved in a property. Always do the numbers first. And it's okay to extend yourself, but I would never overextend yourself. You never want to be racking up so much debt that you feel crippled by the thing that you've bought. So it really is a numbers game, and it's also looking at the area in which you want to buy. Is it growing? Is there growth in the economy? For example, in New Zealand, we call them rates. They're the local council rates, but whatever the fees that you're going to have to pay each year to keep that property upkept, the current regional rates, whatever it is, you just need to factor in all those little hidden costs. And if you feel it's at a good price and you can put down a decent enough deposit, and your mortgage or loan that you're going to get out is serviceable by your current income, then it's probably a no-brainer. And if you're prepared to sit on it for several years, like I appreciate I sold mine in 2 and I might be selling another one, but I'm selling to buy and invest in something else again. So otherwise you should be able to sit on property for many, many, many years, and it should earn you revenue during that time. And then when you sell it, you get the capital gain. So, I mean, we could do a whole interview just on real estate. And I'm by no means the expert, but it is about doing your numbers, understanding where you're going to be. Like Portugal to me was a little bit of a risk, but it was such a cheap house, like in comparison, that I knew I could probably, even if all else went to, the dogs, I could probably still afford it. And I can also rent it for a lot more than it kind of cost me, which is really lucky. Thanks to Airbnb. Before that would have been very difficult. So I think it's just knowing. And Portugal's the only one that I'm a little bit like, I don't know if it's really going to go up. It's not in a huge growth town. It's not like it's in Lisbon, which has gone up about 4-fold in the past couple of years. I missed that boat. I missed buying there. But it is in a really neat area, and it is growing, and it's going to be longer term, slower growth. And in the meantime, I get to enjoy it, and my friends get to enjoy it, and people get to go and stay there, and it's close to surfing and the beaches, and that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure it's growing. Whenever I talk to locals, I did in the last days, everybody's really excited about the future, and you see the economy is recovering and everything is going up, not just in Lisbon, also around Lisbon and all the districts, and especially I also think where you invested. So it was also a smart move.
I hope so.
Now I forgot my question. Okay, I got it back. Would you say that investing in your properties, you also sold some already? You told me just was a bigger leverage than scaling your business?
I think I think it is, but my business has allowed me to buy them. So as potentially people can understand from this interview, I was a tax-free nomad for many years, which is extraordinarily awesome. When you are traveling the world and you have no base and you're not earning income in that country through a company, you can pretty much earn income without having to pay tax. Or I got to a certain
traveling,
point. Exactly, and I wasn't a resident of any country anymore for that time. So that really helped me to save up money very quickly, because when you live out of a suitcase, you don't buy stuff, and I certainly didn't buy things for any unnecessary reason, and traveling can be quite cheap. And so I was just saving up money, and my business is doing really well. And so I just put that straight into property, which was incredibly lucky to be able to have that much capital. So I think it's just about, it is about timing and using it. So thanks to my business and the income that was coming in, I was able to invest in real estate, which is now returning, a lot more and should over the long run. But businesses like perpetual revenue that you can go up and down depending on what you're doing. And real estate should stay pretty steady growth, but incrementally over a longer time. So I think it's just being really mindful about your income streams and looking for a mix of different revenues that doesn't leave you stranded if something happens.
All right. And now we are coming to one of the most exciting parts of the interview. What happened in 2017? What changed in your life?
Just a little bit. So we haven't even caught up on this, but I've basically flipped my life about 180 degrees. I went from actually coming back from Portugal. I left there at the end of November, early December, came back for Christmas in New Zealand, and then kind of got together with this wonderful man. We decided to buy an amazing house. Yeah.
How did this happen? Because just what I could see from the distance is it all changed really, really quickly. Did you know Josh before, or was it just about this man, or why
No,
did the change happen so quickly?
It's a great question. It was a combination of things. I met Josh in February of last year. So I had actually met him at a conference for 30 seconds. We'd followed up and caught up a few times, and then when we started dating, it was pretty quick. But that's mainly because in a week's time after we actually got together and had our first date, I was heading off to London to speak at TEDx. So we had basically this really fun, intense week. And then I kind of got on a plane and thought, well, is that it? Like so many, times of traveling. But he actually came over to travel and see me in Lisbon and came to my retreat. And then we sort of split away and then came back and split away. And when I finally came back to New Zealand and he came back as well, we decided to make a go of it. And then just a couple of months later, because you know how I like to take action, we decided to buy this amazing property, because I was like, well, if I'm going to be based in New Zealand, might as well just live the lifestyle that I want here. And that involves land and having a puppy finally and chickens again and a beautiful place to invite our friends and our family. And I really did think, if I'm going to not travel as much as I did before, then I want a place that people can travel to see me, and I can welcome them into my home like they've welcomed me into theirs.
Yes.
So that, you've got an open invite. You and Philly have got an open invite here.
Oh, thank you so much.
And we want to run retreats here, and we could do a little mini DNX. But it also, when we looked at buying this place, it had the opportunity to run retreats, to host Airbnb guests, to run events in our barn, to farm the land, to live organically off the land, and just so many factors that I think I'd been missing while living out of a suitcase. But in addition to buying the property, I then had to we had to buy stuff because we didn't have any stuff. Both of us were quite nomadic. And on top of that, I got a puppy in the first 10 days. We got chickens within the first week. Oh. And I decided to go on a business sabbatical. So I can't, every single piece of my identity flew out the window because I didn't have my business, day in, day out to keep me funded. I had this puppy that was like a child, even though she's amazing. We had this massive house, and I wasn't used to being isolated in a house. It was my first winter that I'd experienced in 7 years. And I was in a partnership for the first time in 5 years. So I couldn't really have, it was maybe a little much. I'm not going to lie. It was a little much, I think. And I really had to work through my identity and am I still a suitcase entrepreneur, and what does this all mean? And I think it was good to sort of dwell in those places and just really take time off and slow down and go, what am I all about, and what is my vision, and what do I want to do, and what happens when you flip your life 180. So it was tough, but it was also a very good time for me.
I can imagine. I think it was also very insightful and very, a new experience, seeing all your nomadic friends posting the pictures from all over the world and you being more or less stuck in this house. So what were your learnings about how you identify yourself?
That was pretty weird, I'm not going to lie. But it was funny though, because when I'd see photos of you guys or other friends, I'd be like, oh, that looks really great. I wish I could wiggle my nose and just be with them for just a day and then be back here. And that was really interesting to me, is that I ultimately wanted to be right where I was. And also by looking at other people's photos, I didn't have FOMO, fear of missing out, but I did have this sudden realization that when I was traveling like that all the time, people must have thought I was crazy, because you look at it and I'm like, gosh, that looks tiring. How is she there? And now she's there, and gosh, now she's there. So it just kind of was a bit like looking back at the former me. Not that I'm never going to travel again by any means. I'm off to Australia in a day, but just it was really odd. It was just like looking out from the outside at all these years that I'd spent doing that and just going, wow, that's a pretty crazy lifestyle. Like, how did you do that?
Really, really exciting. But you also changed like a little bit of your branding for 2017 and called out these quests for freedom. Do you have any takeaways and any learnings already on this? How this worked out for you?
Yeah. So the Suitcase Entrepreneur has actually just had a bit of a rebrand as well. But Quest for Freedom was me sort of breaking out a bit into my personal brand and just making sure that no matter what happens with Suitcase Entrepreneur, that Natalie Sisson is still all about freedom. And that it was also me just kind of wanting to pursue that more and look at just really dive deeper into personal freedom and what does that mean. And so I changed the podcast over to it so it's narrative. And it's really fun, and it's just me learning and sharing and going through the different phases of freedom and also looking at personal freedom, financial freedom, relationship freedom. And it's just really, it's like it's my creative zone. It's allowing me to do things slightly differently over here that feel really real and resonate right now whilst keeping the Suitcase Entrepreneur. Like I've got lots of new product ideas that are coming out soon. And then I just have some other business. For the first time in my life, I have a few businesses going on. So that feels good.
Great. Can't wait for it. And one of your new projects and your new business is your book launch, right? Could you tell a little bit more about this?
Well, it's one of the new projects within the Suitcase. Yeah, I'm so excited. Yay. So I self-published the Suitcase Entrepreneur book back in 2013, right when I was in the depths of my digital nomadism and traveling the world like crazy. And it went really, really well. It became an Amazon #1 bestseller. And then I updated it a couple of years later. And recently I took on an agent just to see if I could get a publishing contract. I wanted to see what the other side was like. Self-publishing is amazing and it gives you lots of freedom, but it's a ton of work. And then traditional publishing felt like a little less free, but just something that I wanted to investigate to see the different sides. And while my agent was talking.
And it's also another revenue model, like the revenue shares and how you get your payments, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You don't get as much. Well, you don't get as much from the book, but you get an upfront contract. So my agent pitched them on this new book called The Freedom Plan. And they said, actually, we really like Natalie's existing book and her work. Would she be open to selling us the North American rights? And I was like, a book that's been out for already like almost 4 years. And so, I went ahead with it. It was great. It was a 5-figure contract. They've been amazing to work with. They're one of the big 5 publishers in the world. And they've been really supportive. And the book looks great. I got my copy. I've got my copies right in front of me. It's slightly smaller and lightweight, which is way handier for people traveling.
That's cool.
It looks really good, and I've updated it fully, and I've added a free companion course that people can get with it. And you guys are in that. Your case study. So it just feels really good. And I think in many ways the book was kind of a little bit of a savior for me, because when I was on my business sabbatical thinking about what am I really wanting to do and throwing everything up in the air and wondering if I was on the right track, knowing that I had the book coming out and revisiting it and updating it really kind of brought me back to the whole reason why I started my business in the first place. It was like I fell back in love with it thanks to rereading through it, because I'm really proud of that book. Like, it still stands the test of time, and it's still got just a ton of useful information. And it was, it's kind of cool to come off the business sabbatical and come straight into launching it and feeling just almost revisiting the last 7 years of business in many ways.
Yeah, like closing the circle and reconnecting to your identity. What brought you there, where you are now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so great to hear. Can't wait to hold the book in my hand. I think we will go to Coburg Lisboa tomorrow on the next days. I know that you sent us also some books for the conference. Really looking forward to it.
I hope it's there. I hope it's there. The publishers have been sending them out, but let's keep our fingers crossed. And when whoever is listening and who's interested in you and in the book, where could people find out more about you in the internet? It's full of you when they Google for Natalie Sisson, I'm sure, but maybe you have a landing page or something. Yeah, I mean, obviously, my main website is suitcaseentrepreneur.com. And if they want to find out more about the book and where they can buy it and get the companion course, it's suitcaseentrepreneur.com/book. Pretty easy. And it's also, you can link to it from my website. So that'd be great. And if they want to say hi on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Natalie Sisson. So I love connecting there as well.
Great. Before we close this episode, I have one question. What are your thoughts about the development of the freedom movement, about the digital nomad movement, about the future of work, about the high-tech movement, and also like what I experience is it's also going into more high touch, like more people looking for like-minded people, like-minded tribes, looking for real-world connections. What are your thoughts about this movement?
That's a pretty small parting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's so freaking exciting, and I don't think we've had any other time up until now, obviously, where I'm really starting to see a huge shift in the movement there. And not just because you and I are involved in that bubble. Outside of that bubble, there's just more people who are understanding what location independence means, what flexi working is, what remote working is, around building a business that you can run from anywhere. And there's more tools and technologies that are embracing it. And even bigger corporations and organizations are kind of waking up to the fact that they can have flexible and remote workforces. They're providing more for people to be able to work from home, and they're having systems set up in their company where you can, actually connect in from outside, but do it safely and securely. And I just can see, literally, I think in 5 or 6 years' time, it's been predicted there'll be no offices. I don't think there'll ever be any no offices because people still want spaces to connect, but I think they'll look amazingly different. If you walk into banks, especially here in New Zealand, banks are no longer the tellers. They're like cafes. They're seriously like cafes where you sit down and chill and you mingle. And I just think more and they're just amazing. It's like a place to connect and to support each other. And the fact that I'm looking to open up a co-working space shows you what I think about this space. I also just think with the way that we're going with driverless cars and extra boundaries for people having to commute so much longer, people are going to smarten up about this stuff and start having central hubs that aren't necessarily in the main cities or where the corporations are, but these little hub offices and places for people to work from. So it's a really exciting time. Cost of travel's always coming down. The world seems to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And as we've seen, just a plethora of services are leaping off the internet at us to help us to be able to do all this. And it just didn't exist even 7 years ago. So look at how quickly that's changing.
So
we're in the right place.
Changed. We're in the right time. We're in the right place to make history, right?
Yeah.
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 So exciting. Thank you so much, Natalie, for your time. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom. Thank you for being a friend of us. And thank you that you are here in this world. Thank you that you're making a change.
And huge thanks to you. I wish I could be there at DNX Lisbon. You guys should be.
Next time, better luck. It's not the last time, I'm sure. Yeah. So all the best for New Zealand and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Natalie. Bye. Yes, yo, that's it. 3 more things before you leave. First, please give me a review on iTunes. Second, go to dnxcommunity.com and connect with thousands of other life hackers and digital nomads. And third, go to dnxnews.com and sign up for free to get my 7 secrets to success and regular news from the road. See you at our next DNX Digital Nomad Conference in Lisbon, Portugal. All infos on dnxglobal.com. Peace and out.